In a time when the sacred and the profane are increasingly indistinguishable, a new pope rises, not simply as a spiritual leader, but as a global icon. But what if his emergence was foretold long ago, hidden within the visions of Pope Leo XII and the fading echoes of ancient prophecies? This is not just a story of ecclesiastical succession. It is the opening act in a larger drama, one where faith, deception, and global transformation collide. What lies beneath the surface of the Vatican's solemn rituals may not be divine at all. It begins, as many things do in Rome, with whispers. Whispers that curl through the stone corridors of ancient basilicas, that seep beneath locked doors in the Vatican, that slip between the pages of dusty, untranslated tomes hidden deep within the secret archives. In the silence of these sacred halls, one name has returned. A name that had once faded into the yellowing margins of history, but now surfaces with renewed weight: Pope Leo. And not just any Leo, but Pope Leo XII, the man who heard Satan speak, who glimpsed perhaps the full scope of a cosmic battle that would unfold over centuries. Now, as another papal transition looms on the horizon, some ask whether the Church is circling back, not in ritual but in destiny. The papacy has always held an enigmatic duality, both holy and imperial, spiritual shepherd and geopolitical force. While the faithful look to Rome for guidance, others, often in silence, look to Rome for secrets. And what secret could be more deeply buried than the possibility that a past pope foresaw the very path the Church would take, and that his legacy was silenced to clear the way for another agenda? Pope Leo XII's infamous vision, the one that allegedly drove him to compose the prayer to St. Michael, speaks of a dialogue with Satan himself, in which the devil was granted a century to try to destroy the Church. A story dismissed by scholars, downplayed by historians, and left out of most catechisms, but clung to by those who feel that something in the world has shifted, subtly but deeply, since Leo's time. What if Leo saw more than he was permitted to speak? What if the vision wasn't just about Satan attacking the Church, but about a transformation from within? A metamorphosis orchestrated not by overt destruction, but by slow, subtle compromise. The idea that the Church would not fall to enemies outside its walls, but to infiltration, to redefinition, to a spiritual drift so incremental that even its shepherds might not notice until it was too late. Perhaps this is why Leo's legacy has been largely ceremonial, why the deeper implications of his reign have never taken root in mainstream discussion. Perhaps there were those, even then, who understood the danger of his insight. Now, with Pope Francis approaching the end of his papacy and murmurs of succession growing louder, the question returns with force: who will be next? But more importantly, who has already been chosen? Because history has taught us that conclaves are rarely what they seem. White smoke may signal consensus, but what deals precede it? What unseen hands maneuver the chessboard long before the cardinals gather under Michelangelo's dome? These are not simply matters of faith, but of power. Spiritual, yes, but also political, financial, and esoteric. There are claims, veiled and unprovable, yet persistent, that the next pope has already been selected, not by divine inspiration, but by a coalition of secular and religious forces with a vision for the Church that is far removed from its original mission. Some speak of a Jesuit Masonic alignment, a synthesis of old European lodges and modern intelligence networks, all seeking a figure who will complete the pivot of the Church toward a new world theology. A pope not of tradition, but of transformation, one who will not defend doctrine but dissolve it, gently, with smiles and rhetoric, until little remains of the old foundation. And here the shadow of Pope Leo XII grows long, for in recalling his vision, one must also recall his warnings. He feared not only demonic influence, but the human structures through which such influence might be carried. Financial institutions, philosophical movements, pseudo-charitable foundations, the scaffolding of a new world order disguised in benevolence. Leo saw the rise of socialism, Freemasonry, and global capitalism not as separate threats, but as hydra heads of the same beast. And now, over a century later, we live in the full flowering of that vision, a time when the sacred is often indistinguishable from the political, when spiritual authority bows to popular consensus, when even the Vatican partners openly with global corporations and NGOs in language of inclusion and climate responsibility, carefully avoiding the language of sin, repentance, and eternal truth. In the underground chambers of speculative theology, there are those who believe that the final phase of Leo's vision is being prepared, that the next pope will be the last stepping stone toward a post-Christian church. Not an empty throne, but a throne occupied by a figure so charismatic, so universally beloved, that few will notice the shift until the ground has fully changed beneath their feet. Some fear he will be the false prophet described in the book of Revelation, paving the way not for Christ, but for a counterfeit Messiah, a global leader who speaks of unity while drawing all spiritual allegiance into a singular, controlled system. A system that promises peace but delivers surveillance, obedience, and spiritual sterilization. But how can one speak of these things openly? The church is a fortress, both physically and rhetorically. Dissent is marginalized, and critics are dismissed as cranks, schismatics, or conspiracy theorists. Yet silence in the face of convergence between prophecy, politics, and power is itself a kind of complicity. That is why some now revisit Pope Leo XII, not as a quaint relic of pre-modern Catholicism, but as a prophet whose warnings are only now being understood. In him, they see a bridge, not backward but forward, toward understanding what is truly unfolding behind the red curtains of the Vatican. Is it coincidence that discussions of the next pope emerge amid geopolitical tremors across the Middle East, economic instability in the West, and growing calls for global governance in health, climate, and digital identity? Is it mere happenstance that, as the world cries out for leadership, the world's oldest spiritual throne prepares for a transition? Or are we watching the careful synchronization of events designed to align at a critical moment, a moment when spiritual authority can be rebranded, repackaged, and redistributed under a new banner? Some look to Africa or Asia as the likely source of the next pontiff, suggesting that the church seeks to reflect global diversity. But others, quieter, less public, suggest that geography is not the true criteria. Allegiance is. Allegiance to an idea that transcends national boundaries, religious labels, or even traditional theology. An idea rooted in technocratic harmony, humanist spirituality, and the erasure of doctrinal absolutes. A pope who will not resist the tide but ride it, blessing each new synthesis as though it were organic, inevitable, and ordained. And yet, beneath all this speculation, there remains a deeper mystery. Some believe that Pope Leo XII left behind more than just prayers and encyclicals, that within the vaults beneath the apostolic palace lie unpublished manuscripts, sealed directives, and perhaps even a prophecy known only to a select few. A prophecy about the sequence of popes, the rise of the counterfeit church, and the final confrontation between light and darkness. Not in metaphor, but in reality. A prophecy that points not only to who will become pope, but to what the papacy itself will become. In this light, the selection of the next pope is not just an ecclesiastical event. It is a signal to the faithful, to the initiated, and to the adversary. A signal that the final act is beginning, and that those who understand the true stakes must now choose where they stand. Because in the end, the battle is not merely for control of the Vatican. It is for the soul of the church, the meaning of the gospel, and the fate of mankind.